Welcome to the Skull King Football Podcast, presented by Fox DFS Firelines. Now, here are your hosts, Justin and Ryan Skullrood.
Hello and welcome back to the Skull King Fantasy Football Podcast. My name is Ryan Skullrood. I'm your host tonight. With me on the show is
Greg Talcott, joining you from sunny and fairly warm Scottsdale, Arizona.
While I am in rainy Seattle, which shouldn't surprise anyone. We've got a fun show for you tonight, a big kind of a Thanksgiving special, I guess you could say. What we're doing tonight is we're going over some news and notes with injuries and stuff like that. And then what we're doing is we're kind of splitting our DFS portion for this weekend into two sections. So with Thanksgiving Thursday, there's always three games. So what Yahoo, since that's our main platform of choice for DFS, they have a separate Thursday-only slate for those three games. So we're actually going to give some of our picks. Greg and I will give some of our picks for just that Thursday slate, as well as, afterwards we'll go on and move on to the weekend slate. So, all right, well, why don't we go ahead and get started, get into all the news and notes. Let's start from the top. Andrew Luck has officially been ruled out against the Steelers due to his concussion. This absolutely kills the chances of Indianapolis really having any competitive anything in this game, to be completely honest. So I guess we're streaming the Steelers defense, aren't we?
I think that would be the solid play this week. I mean, Indy's backup quarterback hasn't seen the field in years. Home or not, this is definitely looking like a loss for Indianapolis. So I think Pittsburgh was like a solid play.
There's actually another one on there is for that game. Dante Moncrief was actually added to the injury report today, Wednesday, and is questionable for Thursday night against the Steelers. That is not bad news when you crop up on the injury report the day before a game. I actually moved him out. I've already moved him out when I saw this out of a couple of my lineups for my season-long leagues. This makes it even worse for Indianapolis at this point.
Yeah, he wasn't exactly a primo matchup this week, playing with one Scott Tolzien in the first place. So, yeah, late minute addition to the injury report. Whatever he has, maybe it's not that serious. Maybe if Andrew Luck's playing and they have a chance to be competitive in the game, this is one that he plays. But if they know that this one is basically a throwaway, then why run out there and risk further injury when you're competing for a playoff spot?
Yeah, pretty much. I think this would maybe give a little bit of a bump to say Jack Doyle and Dwayne Allen, simply because they're the only big bodies left, and the backup quarterback tends to get fixated on throwing to tight ends just because of those short dump off passes. But other than that, I mean, I don't see him getting the ball down the field to T.Y. Hilton this week. So
no, not Scott Tolzien. I mean, the guy is 29 years old. He's been in the league 6 years, and I've never heard of him before we started the show.
I read a thing. His last meaningful pass was in 2013, the year that Obama started his second term in office. So,
how timely! It's one of those every 4-year things.
All right, Jimmy Graham did not practice today. I don't see this as a major deal. I think this is more of a kind of a veteran day off. I know a lot of guys in that Seattle-Philadelphia game got beat up. I really think that this is today is a veteran day off on Wednesday. So that's more the way I see that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a short week. Jimmy Graham can afford to miss a game. Seattle not exactly be hurt for it, especially in a fairly winnable game against Tampa Bay. I mean, Seattle's really clicking at this point. Russell Wilson's doing his normal second half of the season thing, and just makes everybody on the team look better as a result. So the whole team could probably miss practice at this point.
Probably. All right. We got on here, Mark Ingram said that he is still in the league's concussion protocol. that gives a major boost to Tim Hightower for this weekend going up against a Los Angeles Rams, kind of a decimated Los Angeles Rams defense that has not been performing all that well. In New Orleans, I could see Tim Hightower not only running the ball well, but also getting a bunch of dump-off passes for extra yards. In PPR leagues, that's going to be absolutely huge.
Yeah, he's a huge value this week. I mean, the Rams are giving up 102 yards a game, 4 yards a carry. And as you said, they're the kind of team that's more or less, I think, on the downslope performance-wise on defense versus where they started the year. So from a value play perspective, he's a super strong play this weekend.
Yeah. Here's something kind of interesting. Tom Brady was not at Wednesday's practice. He was listed with a knee injury. He didn't have any. Apparently, he didn't have any injury concerns in Sunday's win over San Francisco. We're guessing that this is just a maintenance day, but I think it's definitely interesting considering that Brady doesn't ever miss practice. Even when he was suspended, he wasn't missing practices. So I think that this is kind of an interesting note that he would miss practice with a knee injury.
That is kind of strange. I mean, maybe they had Thanksgiving travel plans and Giselle put her foot down and said they were leaving early to avoid some traffic, and Tom finally gave in after all these years. I mean, that could be a plausible explanation, but otherwise it is really weird. I mean, the guy in all seriousness is as dedicated as they come. So it was kind of strange for him to miss practice. Plus, Tom Brady's best games historically have not been against the Jets. Now, I think part of that is his matchups with Rex Ryan in the past, but, at New York is usually not his best game of the season.
True. And then to go along with that, Rob Gronkowski actually did practice. He was limited. So this is a step forward from last week where he didn't practice at all. He was actually grounded, wasn't allowed to fly because of his perforated lung from the hit he took from Earl Thomas in that Seattle Sunday night game. I'm still not sure that Rob Gronkowski actually plays this week. I still think that you're better, even if he does, I think he will be limited. So you're still better off going with maybe a Martellus Bennett if you're going to stick with that New England offense in terms of the tight ends.
Yeah, it's too big of a risk to play Gronkowski at this point. Like you said, he's going to be limited if he does get in there. So Bennett's the safe play especially for the value at I think $18 this week, $16.
Yeah, 16 or 18, something like that. All right. In terms of for Thursday, for the first game of the day, the Lions and the Vikings, even though he is listed as questionable for Thursday versus Detroit, Vikings wide receiver Stephon Diggs is unlikely to play due to his knee injury from various different sources. So I think that this really puts a damper on the limited offense of the Vikings already. This basically makes their only viable pass catching what you would consider a weapon is Kyle Rudolph, which he could have a big game because Detroit is the second worst against in terms of giving up fantasy points to tight ends. But I think this does give a boost to I think Adam Thielen as a possible play for Thursday or even just in general for weekly fantasy.
Yeah, Thielen actually looked good last week. I liked what I saw out of him, and certainly, the injury to Stephon Diggs is not good here near term, and especially not good for Minnesota's incredibly painful to watch offense. I mean, if it wasn't for the fact that you had 200-yard plays last week, an interception, return for a touchdown, and a kickoff return. I mean, that offense once again looked absolutely dreadful. It's like watching paint dry or a presentation on annuities and death benefit riders when you watch Minnesota play offense. I mean, it's just ponderous.
I can't help but laugh at some of your comparisons. Here we go. DeMarco Murray did not practice on Wednesday. Again, I think this is more of a a veteran maintenance day. I don't see him missing time and given time to Derrick Henry any more than he already has. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, who doesn't want to get on the field against the Bears, who now are down, starting middle linebacker with Freeman being, suspended for PEDs. So apparently him and Alshon Jeffrey were hanging out together,
Taking expired PEDs that weren't necessarily helping.
Yeah, either rubbing cream on each other, shots in the butt or whatever they had to do to get this stuff to not really work for them because, again, the Bears stink, and they're not going to be any better without these two guys on the field.
All right. I love I love having you on the show, Greg. All right. Here we go. The NFL has suspended Steelers running back Carlos Williams 10 games for violating the league's substance abuse policy. This guy's done in the NFL. Let's be honest. After last year, he had this, great season where I want to say like his first 6 or 7 games he scored a touchdown. Was not only a good backup to LaShawn McCoy when McCoy was out, but he was fantasy relevant on his own as a running back 2 or 3, or even a possible flex play. Then this year, his girlfriend gets pregnant and he puts on a whole bunch of sympathy weight, is basically the way he put it, coming into camp. So he was like 20 pounds overweight. Then he couldn't keep up in any of the drills. Then he ends up getting cut by the Bills, and then I want to say he couldn't get a workout with anyone, and finally the Steelers pick him up, and now violating this league substance abuse policy. Actually, I think he started out the season with a 4-game suspension for marijuana test, and now it's up to 10 games because he got caught with it again.
Well, that's why I put on the weight. He had the munchies from the marijuana while he was hanging out with his wife at home while she was pregnant. I mean, he did start out great last year. I mean, just exploded out of the gates, and then, just absolutely fizzled and died. And, I mean, I don't know what he was doing, sitting in a car wash all this time or what he was waiting for. I mean, to not get a call from anybody. I mean, up in Seattle, you guys can't keep a running back on the field for, more than a half. This guy should have gotten a sniff somewhere along the lines and didn't. So I agree with you. I don't think this guy's going to see the light of day again. Part of the Johnny Manziel All-Star flag football team, somewhere on Comedy Central or True TV or something like that next season.
Let's think about it. You've got Johnny Manziel, who could be the quarterback. You've got Josh Gordon as the wide receiver. Carlos Williams as the running back. Who else can we add to that team?
That's an all-star team. There's a lot of exciting players on that roster. Getting them to show up on time might be a challenge, though.
There we go. All right. Okay, going into what you were mentioning about the Seahawks football team, running back Tremaine Pope, who was brought up from the practice squad after the release of Kristen Michael, is expected to be out 2 weeks with a high ankle sprain. Not only did the Seahawks lose CJ Procise for, what are they saying, 4 to 6 weeks with a broken scapula. You've got Tremaine Pope, who came into the game for Procise to give Rawls a break and ends up getting a high ankle sprain. And so they were trying to keep Rawls out of that fourth quarter, and then he had no choice but to come back in the fourth quarter. So right now, as far as I've seen, the only 2 actual running backs on the Seattle roster are Rawls and Alex Collins, and then I want to say their fullback Tukuafu, who they're not giving him the ball to run it. So that should make for a whole lot of fun in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, it's all or nothing, with Rawls at this point, and it gets back to everything's going on Russell Wilson's shoulders at this point. Anyway, I mean, this is his time to shine. And carry the team in the back half of the season. And this, I think, just ups the ante as far as that's concerned. It's not really going to detract, I don't think, from the team overall.
Yeah. All right. Sammy Watkins has declared himself 100% healthy after participating in Wednesday's practice. Now, Justin and I talked about this on our last show. I am hesitant. I'm fine for someone to pick up Sammy Watkins. I'm hesitant for anyone to play him this week. Justin actually asked me who I thought would score more fantasy points this week, Marvin Jones or Sammy Watkins. And maybe I'm just being overly hopeful that Jones can actually get a little bit going. But I still think Marvin Jones will score more fantasy points this week than Sammy Watkins, if Sammy Watkins is active.
Geez, that is, man, that's a real prisoner's dilemma when you're looking at those two options. Because, I mean, Marvin Jones has just plummeted to earth like a Russian satellite and just slammed into the ground and produced absolutely nothing for weeks. Like everybody else I drafted. It's a who's who of who stinks in the NFL when it comes to my roster. So I'm familiar with the fact that that's a long shot bet to take Marvin Jones at this point, but I agree. Potential-wise, he certainly has more potential of putting up points than one Sammy Watkins, who to declare himself healthy is a bit laughable anyway.
He declared himself healthy earlier in the season when he said, he can play through the pain. His ankle's all right. And what do you know? 2 days later, he's on IR for 8 weeks. So
yeah, it's like the time that Bush declared victory on that aircraft carrier deck.
All right. Tevin Coleman with his hamstring has been practicing in full for Week 12 against the Cardinals. So it looks like Coleman will finally be back to spell Devontae Freeman a little bit. Maybe now that they'll have both of them, they could actually, Atlanta could actually win a game.
Right. Well, I mean, Coleman coming back is a nice play in a pinch for, I think, for people who are a little thin at the running back position like myself. Overall, he's never really going to, I don't think, contend with Devontae Freeman for too much as far as taking that workload away. I mean, Freeman has shown that over both seasons that he's still going to be the main guy even with Coleman coming back. And speaking of can't stay healthy, I mean, that guy's he's just a train wreck from a health standpoint. So whatever you ever do get out of him, if you do have to play him, you should consider yourself lucky.
Well, let's remember, Tevin Coleman was actually announced the starter last season. And Freeman and he got knocked out with it was like a hamstring or a broken rib or something, and that's what gave Freeman the playing time for him to explode onto the scene fantasy wise.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think watching them play, Freeman just looks like the better back of the two.
Yeah. All right. Jeremy Maclin was not practicing Wednesday. He did not play this last week. He has not been practicing. I'm putting him on the shelf. Really, I mean, I don't think he can stay healthy. And even if he does get healthy enough to play, I don't see him, really producing on a bum leg.
No, I agree with that. And if he's going to do it, it's probably not best against Denver. I mean, Denver's weaker against the run than they are against the pass, ultimately. And so I don't think this is a great matchup either way that you look at. If this is the game that you're coming back for, this isn't where you would expect to put up some big numbers. So I mean, he's borderline wide receiver 3 if he were healthy and ready to go, I think, in this game.
Yeah. Charles Sims, another guy that I drafted that went on to IR at one point this season, has returned to practice Wednesday. It looks like he is eligible to come back to the active roster. December 5th is when he's eligible, which at that point you're looking at, what is that, week 14, first week of the fantasy playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
He's only eligible to come back at that point. So he's more of a guy, if you have the roster space to pick up a guy to kind of hold on to, you're already in the playoffs, your team is set. That's about the only reason I would be picking up Charles Sims at this point.
I totally agree. I mean, if he does come back in those last 2 games, I mean, Tampa Bay theoretically might have, something they're trying to play for besides just pride, even though that's realistically a long shot. But at least he's trying to play for that job at the end of the day, or a job somewhere. And, he can certainly compete against Doug Martin, who's been obviously a pretty big disappointment versus how he performed last year, but far from predictable if this wasn't your first year in fantasy football.
Yeah. Here a couple notes. We don't necessarily need to go into them much. LaShawn McCoy was limited in practice Wednesday. Whether he plays, I mean, if you've got Mike Gillislee, great. If you don't, I mean, at this point, because they're still fighting to get into the playoffs, for a chance at the playoffs. I think McCoy plays no matter what. I think Rex Ryan would have to have him hauled off the field on a stretcher before he doesn't play. Robert Woods is not practicing, so he's still. I think that's one of the reasons they want to make sure to try to get Sammy Watkins back is because Woods hasn't been able to stay healthy the last few weeks.
Right, and yeah, Jacksonville's obviously not a good football team. I mean, they're giving up 113 yards of ground on the ground each game, so they're in the bottom quarter of the league as far as rush defense is concerned. And so this would be a good game, I think, for McCoy. I mean, like you said, he should be playing. They are playing for something. There aren't a lot of games left, for Buffalo as far as margin of error is concerned. So I think that sense of urgency is going to be there.
Yeah. Bears place tight end Zach Miller on injured reserve with a broken foot, ending his season. No, we'll just move on, so you don't have to rant about the Chicago Bears anymore. How's that?
Good idea.
Let's see. Robert Griffin III has been designated for return from injured reserve and practiced today, being Wednesday. Do you see him becoming fantasy relevant?
Once he gets back in there, he theoretically could be a decent matchup play if, for whatever reason, you didn't have another quarterback. So could he be fantasy relevant? Well, I'm telling you, there's a chance, but it's pretty slim at this point.
Like 1 in 100? No, more like 1 in a million.
1 in a million.
All right. Chargers claimed Ronnie Hillman off of waivers from the Vikings. That really doesn't matter because Ronnie Hillman is hot garbage.
What happened to that guy? I mean, he looked like the last couple of years you watch him in Denver, it's like, oh, wow, this guy, he could just get some more carries if we get these other guys out of the way in front of him. And, he's the man. And good grief.
Yeah.
Just terrible.
And finally, just for you, Greg, Jay Cutler, believed to have has officially torn his labrum and is expected to miss the rest of the season. Finally, you can say you're completely done with Jay Cutler on the Chicago Bears.
That was actually – so when I say prayers tomorrow night at the Thanksgiving table, I was going to lead with the fact that I wouldn't have to watch Jay Cutler again until John Fox attempted to ruin that for me and say that the injury wasn't as serious as it appears. Speaking for Bear fans – it's freaking serious. He's done. There's no reason to bring him back. You got 2 wins. You already know what you got in Jay Cutler, and you already know that you have garbage in Barkley and fails, but it's a different kind of garbage that fans haven't really had a chance to appreciate just yet. But we have had the Jay Cutler variation of failure. It's just like when Hoyer came in. Hoyer was, he was passionate. He was performing well. Sure. We were still going to lose, but it was a different experience in the loss. We've already seen this game after game, year after year. Trust me, John, Jay Cutler is done. Unless Fales and Barkley both die, Cutler should not see the field again in Chicago.
All right, let's get into some daily fantasy. All right, so here's what we're going to do. Let's go ahead and give our little pitch. Yahoo Daily, like we said, is our fantasy platform of choice. Vox, the Vox DFS guys, really, there's a bunch of them that really like playing on Yahoo Daily because of their rules for fair play. They're the industry leader in fair play for DFS platforms to make it easier for the little guy like you and me to be able to compete in their daily fantasy contests with aspects to their fair play rules. Such as limiting entries to a maximum of 10 per user per contest. I know that on the big websites you can actually, which have now merged, FanDuel and DraftKings is in the middle of a merger I think they're saying that it'll finish off right around just after the NFL season in 2017 is when that's going to be. They're still operating as separate platforms, but quick side note. But Yahoo limits entries to a maximum of 10 per user for contests. So on those big sites, you can have 150 entries in a major contest. Not so on Yahoo Daily. It gives everyone a little bit more of a chance to be able to play. Not only that, but they also have a provision that you cannot enter more than 1% of the total entries in a contest. So if there's only 100 players in a contest, you can only have one entry. There's 200, only 2. So again, they're trying to make it as fair as possible for everyone. They identify veteran players with a badge so that you know who you're going up against. You know who the experienced guys are. And they eliminate and prohibit scripting tools to upload or edit entries. Like I said, on the bigger sites, you can actually buy what you could be considered called packs of lineups on like a spreadsheet and upload it straight into one of those big sites, and it'll fill out all of your entries for you. Not so on Yahoo. You have to do it manually. You have to actually put in the time to do it yourself. So again, if you want to play daily fantasy without worrying about playing against a ton of pros with thousands of entries in each contest, create an account and start playing on Yahoo Daily Fantasy today. Again, you can go to skullkingfootball.com/Yahoo Daily in order to find out more. We even have a special little promo on there. Again, go to skullkingfootball.com/Yahoo Daily to find out more about that. All right, so here we go. We're going to get into kind of our special little Thanksgiving Day lineup session here for daily fantasy. There are 3 games for Thursday, and Yahoo has a couple of slates open for just this 3-game Thursday slate. So why don't we go ahead and get into it? Greg, you and I were kind of looking at this. We're not really a fan of a lot of the plays here, just because some of these teams are really struggling, and so it's hard to really pick a guy that you really like that could possibly be a little bit of a value that could possibly go against the grain. I mean, it's hard not to pick chalk in some of these lineups. So let's start with the quarterbacks. Is there one or two that are really sticking out to you for this Thursday slate?
As far as I was concerned, I actually really like what I've seen out of Kirk Cousins. So on a relative value, looking at just tomorrow, I like him. I mean, I think Dak Prescott's a great, is good too at $34, but Cousins, at 30, I think for me, because I'm going to go a little bit heavier, with some other players, tomorrow, like Ezekiel Elliott, I'd rather pair those two than necessarily going all in on the Cowboys with Prescott and Romo. But matchup wise, there's not a lot to like as far as the quarterbacks are concerned.
You could say Ben Roethlisberger going up against Indianapolis. Again, Indianapolis has lost a big majority of their offense with Moncrief being out, with Andrew Luck being out. Their defense isn't very good, so their defense is going to be on the field the entire stinking game because the offense isn't going to be able to sustain drives. And they're going to run Frank Gore into the ground. So, Ben Roethlisberger, and it's indoors, so that could help Ben Roethlisberger with his, with how bad his home and away splits can be.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing with Roethlisberger, which was my concern this week, was short week and then not great on the road. And I agree that Indy's offense is probably just not going to produce anything this week. But I think that also lends itself to maybe lesser opportunities for Roethlisberger because, maybe you end up just running the ball a lot more. With Le'Veon Bell, you just try to get out of there. Just keep the clock going. I mean, nobody wants to be there.
True.
For the most part. Nobody really wants to be in Indianapolis in November anyway. And if it's Thanksgiving and you just played a few days ago, I got to imagine that that's a magnified feeling that one has. So the quickest way to get out of there is just control the ball, run the clock down, and get out of there. So he puts up probably some decent numbers, but is it $36 worth? I don't think so. I think in the Washington-Dallas game, you have a game that's competitive, which is going to force Cousins to produce a lot more. So I think that $6 you end up, getting better value somewhere else.
All right, let's go to the running backs. Obviously, Ezekiel Elliott at $41, you're going to load up on him. Washington is one of the worst run defenses. They're going to give the ball to Ezekiel Elliott. He's been an absolute monster this season. And we talked about, Le'Veon Bell. Here, if you have any more comments on just those two.
No, I think again, they're the two best backs, in football, I think, at this point. So you're looking at getting in this weekend's matchup, and I think basically every weekend, excellent value for the money you spend. You spend a lot, but you get a lot for them. These guys are not going to lay eggs. Elliott's definitely not looking to lay an egg. I think he's got, much bigger visions in his mind of what his rookie year is going to look like, as far as taking down a few more numbers that aren't just Cowboy records this year. So he has a lot to play for, I think, on the personal side. And so for $41, you got to go there. He's one of the safest plays this week, as always.
Would you want to even think about Frank Gore at $25, considering, again, they've got Scott Tolzien running as quarterback? They're not going to have much of a choice. How does Pittsburgh's defense against the rush? Well, against the rush, they're only 95 yards per game?
Yeah.
So, they're able to stop up the run a little bit too. So they did lose Hayward, though, on their defensive line. So, that could be – that could affect them a little bit, but yeah, I don't trust them either.
There's just not a lot to like about that. Not at $25, and not where, again, can you find a little bit better value? I'm going with Rob Kelly for $18, which, last week I liked him again, because it's that same thing. Like, we're talking about Frank Gore in Indianapolis, and who else are they going to give the ball to? True point, but in this case, from a running back perspective for Washington, who else are they going to give the ball to? Is to go to Rob Kelly, but they can get it to other players. Kirk Cousins is a capable quarterback. They have three very capable wide receivers. In the case of Frank Gore, capable running back, and then no capability anywhere around him. So I think for a $7 differential, I'd rather go with Kelly.
All right. And let's be honest, there's really nothing in the bargain unless you're just taking a shot in the dark at one of these, $10 running backs. There's really no reason to be going that much value. And you could maybe say Matt Asiata at $11, thinking that if Minnesota can get down there into the red zone, he scores a 1-yard touchdown. Other than that, really, there's not a whole lot of the quote unquote value guys down below that, that $13 mark. There's really nothing worth taking.
That's a total crapshoot.
So, all right. Moving on to the wide receivers. Obviously, you've got Antonio Brown. We talked about Stefon Diggs at $28. He is, at this point, looking like he's going to be out. We've seen, it says on here that Dez Bryant is questionable. They're saying that he's in no danger of missing the game. It'll be Dez Bryant up against Josh Norman. That could be an interesting battle to watch. T.Y. Hilton, I don't trust at $27, again, with Scott Tolzien as the quarterback. So you're looking at, Jamison Crowder, Golden Tate. Again, Dante Moncrief is most likely going to be out. You're looking at maybe, because we were loading up so high on the running backs, this would be, I think there's some good value plays here at the wide receiver spot.
Yeah, I think absolutely you have to stick to the value on this side. It's the same thing with Antonio Brown. If I don't believe in Roethlisberger this week, then I don't believe in Antonio Brown. It was the same thing last week. So this week, I think Golden Tate's the play. Jamison Crowder, Cole Beasley, I think, of course, looks good for Dallas. And you're going to have the Norman on Dez Bryant thing, which, I think that's a lot more hype than anything else. Especially when it comes to the way those matchups have necessarily gone for Norman this season, and the fact that they keep him to the left side. So if they really want to get the ball to Dez, they can move him around. He can move a lot easier, obviously, than Norman can within that system, especially. So I think Tate, Crowder, and Cole Beasley, are three nice value plays right all in that $18 to $20 range.
Yeah, if you want to go a little bit more value, you could go with Adam Thielen of Minnesota. Again, with Stephon Diggs out. I believe Diggs missed last week as well. And Adam Thielen last week went, what was it, five targets, 5 catches for 65 yards and a TD. He was out-targeted by Cordarrelle Patterson, who I want to say had 8 targets. But he had 4 catches for 53 yards. Really, the only thing that made Cordarrelle Patterson's day really noteworthy was the fact that he ran back the touchdown to start off the second half.
Absolutely.
And let's be honest, that's all Cordarrelle Patterson. That's his game. It's the big play. He's not gonna be one of those guys that catches 10 passes for 100 yards and possibly gets into the end zone. He's gonna catch 4 or 5. He's not a high percentage receiver. He's all big play. And
yeah, absolutely.
He's a shot in the dark kind of a guy.
Yeah, home run or nothing with him. And, Diggs is something that we hit on last week going up against Arizona. It's like, well, was he out last week? He wasn't out. He just played against Patrick Peterson. He got 6 catches for 37 yards, and that's it. And that's what we talked about last week.
Yeah.
Patrick Peterson is a legit number 1 shutdown corner, and not on one side of the field, all over the field.
Well, and like I said, Diggs was out again because you had Patrick Peterson on him, and really, Diggs isn't an elite guy. He's not an Antonio Brown who could actually make that a battle worth watching.
Right.
Diggs is good, but he's more of a second or third tier talent. So
absolutely.
All right, to the tight ends. You really just have the normal names that you'd be looking at. Jordan Reed against Dallas, matching him up in the stack with Cousins. You've got Jason Witten has been a decent PPR guy, just because Dak Prescott trusts him as a veteran target. Just not too far off the line of scrimmage. So, I don't know if there's anyone else that you're really liking this week.
Not really. I ended up looking at Eric Ebron this week, and outside of that, I think Witt would have been my play otherwise.
Yeah, I guess you could make a case for Kyle Rudolph because he's going up against the Detroit defense, who is in most Yahoo leagues given up the second most amount of fantasy points to tight ends. The Detroit is horrible against tight ends, and so you can make a case for playing Rudolph there for $18. So
yeah, for sure.
All right, and then to the defenses. Really, we were looking at you and I were really looking. There's only like a couple of defenses that we really trust in this, and we don't even really trust them. Let's be honest. In this game, It was the Pittsburgh Steelers at $11, or the Detroit Lions against that really not much of anything Minnesota offense at $14. Is there one that you prefer over the other?
I think you go with Pitt in this case against Tolzien. You got to assume that this guy in a nationally televised game, again, the first time he's seen the field since Pop Warner, and he's going up against the Steelers. He's not going to play well. The odds are against it. Yeah, he could maybe pull a miracle out, but it's really, really doubtful. So I think you got to go with Pittsburgh here because the guy's bound to at least have a turnover, maybe more than one. And if that's the case, you always have the potential to score off of those.
All right, so that pretty much does it for our Thursday slate. All right, you ready to go into the rest of the weekend?
You got it.
All right, so here we go. Now that we've got done with the Thursday Thanksgiving Day games, let's go into the full slate of games, 13 games, the Sunday Monday slate. Here we go. At quarterback are you looking value or are you looking to spend big money here?
I ended up value just because I don't want to bang the Eli Manning drum again. I was a little off with him last week. He should have had one more touchdown against the Bears. If he did, I think I would have been spot on, but he only ended up with 2. He's going up against Cleveland this weekend. So if I was going to spend money, I go Eli. But I found myself actually going value, $25, so saving $10 with Carson Wentz at home against the Packers. That is, if you looked at what the QB ratings are against that Packers secondary that they put up during the game last week, they're atrocious. I mean, like the QB ratings against these guys, like the lowest, like the best guys, rating against was like 122. I mean, they're like Tecmo Bowl stats that you can put up against these guys. So at home, I really think Carson Wentz has the potential to put up a bigger game, maybe one of his biggest games of the season, and he's only $25.
Well, again, at the $25 range, you're not looking for a monster game out of him. You're looking for a pretty good game out of him. And even if you only get that, Philly's defense has played so well at home. They could keep Green Bay off the field and really allow Carson Wentz to really work wonders against that non-existent Green Bay defense.
Mm-hmm.
All right. For me, there was two quarterbacks I liked and I kind of like, and they're actually both in the same game. For me, I like Russell Wilson against Tampa Bay because of, again, they're really starting to come on, and I think they could really do well. And then if you're going to go, again, value, Jameis Winston at only $27 against San Francisco, that could be a case of Seattle gets up big and gives up, and kind of slacks off a little bit and gives up a couple of touchdowns. Again, at only $27, you're looking, it's possible some value there to not have to do a whole lot. So if we move on, let's go ahead and I'm going to move on to running backs. There's, again, are you spending big or are you looking value again?
I'm really in the value side here, at least with Rashad Jennings against Cleveland. Obviously, Cleveland, one of the worst running defenses in the league. So I think that he's a safe play there. Probably at least a safe touchdown. For you, and minimal yards because they are a pass-happy team. But I think if the Giants can get up big on Cleveland, that adds more value to Jennings. And I also looked at Spencer Ware at $25.
Yeah, with Denver giving up so many yards on the ground as well, that could prove to be a pretty good play. I went more extreme on the value side. I looked at Thomas Rawls at only $19 going against Tampa Bay. I think that Seattle's offense is clicking so well. Thomas Rawls has a full game under his belt of a decent amount of work too. Let's see if he finished 57 rush yards, 3 receptions for 31 yards, and he was still splitting time with CJ Prosise in that game. So I think this game he could come back to really have a decent game himself. And then the other one I was looking at was Tim Hightower. Again, we talked about this in the news and notes with Mark Ingram still in the concussion protocol. I could see Tim Hightower being used a lot against the LA Rams, whose defense has kind of been in shambles the last little bit. Where are they in terms of run defense? They're middle of the pack, like you said, in run defense. Against the pass, against the pass they haven't been too bad, but that could mean that they're using more dump offs and running in New Orleans with Tim Hightower. So.
From a value perspective, I think Hightower might be, as you pointed out, maybe the best value this weekend. The running backs, I think that's just the way you have to play it this week. I don't think there's anything there that's really just jumps out at you that says, I'm going to spend a ton of money. I mean, the time to do that was with the best running backs, and they're playing on Thursday.
Yeah. Well, here's okay. Would you take a flyer at $12 on Wendell Smallwood if it proves that Ryan Matthews and Darren Sproles are both out for Monday night's game?
Absolutely. I actually had Smallwood on my roster way earlier in the season when he looked so good and the little time that he got. And then it was just followed up with nothing. Like the opportunities just have not been there. But he's an explosive player if you've watched him. And I think certainly if the other two guys are out, Green Bay's defense showed last week that they are, in fact, vulnerable and probably more of a paper tiger on the rush defense side, when we look at what Kelly was able to do against him.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to make sure we threw that one out there as I was kind of looking through who's lower on the money scale that could possibly have a good game. Because Justin and I talked about that on the news and notes that both Ryan Matthews and Darren Sproles left the Seattle game early, and it was just Wendell Smallwood basically in the second half against Seattle. So, all right, wide receivers. Again, I think we're looking at value here. I could see maybe going Amari Cooper as a little bit quote unquote higher spend at $28 against Carolina's defensive backfield. But I mean, other than that, I'm more looking value here. What about you?
Yeah, I had Amari Cooper, this weekend against Carolina, number 25 against the pass overall. They have given up 19 passing touchdowns, which is towards the bottom, of the league. Quarterbacks putting up a 95.5 rating this season. So everybody looks pretty good against Carolina. Big dollar wise, I also then here, since I didn't take Eli Manning and I went with Carson Wentz, I had to pair that with somebody out of the Giants receiving core. So you got Sharp or you got Beckham. I had the money to spare, so I went with Beckham. I think against Cleveland, the guy's got to have a monster game.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. Some of the ones I was looking at, Rashard Matthews of Tennessee going up against Chicago. Chicago's given up a ton of yards this year and a ton of points in the passing game. Rashard Matthews has shown that he's developed a pretty good connection with Marcus Mariota. I mean, over the last 3 games alone, he's had 28 targets, 10 for 6, 5 for 3, 13 for 9. And this last game against Indianapolis, it was 9 receptions for 122 yards. He's had 4 touchdowns in the last 4 games. So I think he's really emerging as the main wide receiver target in Tennessee. And again, against that Chicago defense that's pretty much non-existent in terms of passing, he could be a good value for you.
Oh, absolutely. Great value, great matchup, just $22. I had, on the value side, I went with Michael Floyd because I think what we're seeing in the second half, even though Arizona's offense continues to struggle, Floyd has been a lot more involved and has been a lot more productive. He's not dropping as many balls. Carson Palmer is looking his way a lot more often. He's in there at $18. He's got a pretty decent matchup here against Atlanta.
Yeah, 2 other names I wanted to throw out. I mean, you talked about the New York versus Cleveland. I really like Sterling Shepard. He's on a streak. What was it? 3 games in a row now with a touchdown. He's finished with 6, 7, and 11 targets over the last 3 games. And honestly, he hasn't had less than 6 targets since the first or second week of the season. I mean, since September 18th, 8, 7, 7, 7, 8, 7, 6, 7, 11 targets. And he's really started to produce over these last few games. So I like him in that game. And the other one that I was looking at, we're doing a little more deep dive in like we were in the waiver wire show. I kind of like Marquise Lee of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He is proving right now to be the most consistent receiver that they have. Over the last, 6 games, he's only had 1 game under 50 yards receiving. He has finished with either 50 yards or a touchdown over the last 6 weeks. He hasn't had less than he had 1 week where he had 3 targets and 1 reception. That was in October. Other than that, over the last few weeks, he's had 8, then 3, 8, 6, and 8 targets. He's finished with a decent amount of points. I think that with how much Buffalo's secondary struggles against the pass, and we saw how weak it was when Russell Wilson had not done much all season, and all of a sudden our passing offense is exploding against Buffalo. I really think that Marquise Lee could be in for a decent game, again, at a major value of only $16.
Right, and wasn't that like Ryan Fitzpatrick's only good game was the beginning of the season against Buffalo?
I think so.
I think that was it. So, I think that is a good matchup. They have lapses, and maybe that's kind of like their coach just sees gaps, just take over, and it's like, well, what happened there? And everything just got lost in the shuffle. An otherwise good game plan, and you just give up a big play.
Yeah.
So I think that's a solid play.
All right, let's move on to tight ends. Delaney Walker, I think, is pretty obvious at $25 if you're willing to spend the big cash. Again, going up against that non-existent Chicago defense. Rob Gronkowski, we're pretty sure is going to be out for this game, and even if he's in, you'd be better off probably going with Martellus Bennett. Who are you looking at? Who are the guys that you're definitely looking at this week?
I think you look at Bennett. I had Zach Ertz this week. Again, I kind of went off on Green Bay's defense there a little bit as far as targets and whatnot. I mean, he had a good week last week. He's seeing at least a little bit more opportunity here lately. So his season numbers haven't been great. Ertz is one of those guys where it's always big things are expected, and then you turn around and it's just like a bologna sandwich. But I think this is one of those weeks where ultimately the guy, pads his stats a little bit.
Yeah, I was actually managed to pick up Zach Ertz for one of my season-long leagues, and was kind of happy that he was there, especially with the matchup he has against Green Bay. I know we talked about Martellus Bennett at $18, especially if Gronk is out. I think he's a solid play. Greg Olsen could be a solid play again against Oakland. Oakland's defense, they give up a ton of pass yards, and that could be a good matchup to possibly take advantage of there. And then for me, because I have to get his name in this episode, CJ Fedorowicz at $16. For me it's CJ Fedorowicz. For you it's Eli Manning. We can't seem to not talk about him. So
right, we should actually approach those guys if they want to do a sponsorship deal.
All right, and then let's finish it off. Let's look at some defenses. There really weren't a whole lot of defenses that I really liked, except for, again, let's pick on Chicago and Tennessee's defense against Chicago. I think that would be a solid play. Chicago doesn't have a quarterback, really. They don't have Alshon Jeffrey. Their starting wide receivers now are, Marquise Wilson, Cameron Meredith, and Eddie Royal. Doesn't really strike fear into anyone. But I mean, yeah. Other than that, you're paying big bucks for like Miami's defense against San Francisco, Philly's defense against Green Bay, Buffalo's defense against Jacksonville. I don't really feel like paying that much. The $19-20 for defenses. So.
No, I don't see how you can do it. I mean, and just not how you build a roster. I don't know how you get there and even have $19. Every time I get down to my defense, I'm always having to go retool something to get to the $10 minimum to actually fill the slot. And there's just really nothing that's overly attractive here. So if you're trying to get points from the defense, I think you're almost forced to go and pay $19 for the Giants against the Browns. And to take a shot like that, or certainly any matchup against the Bears this week is going to be favorable when you're looking at the combination of Barkley and fails. I mean, that is a fail in and of itself, right there. So $14 if you had it left, I think the Titans are probably the best value play.
Somewhat interesting here. The number one defense, the highest paying defense, $20 for the Miami Dolphins. The lowest is their opponent, the 49ers, for $10. So I just thought that was interesting.
Two sides of the coin.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that about does it for this show. Do you have any more thoughts about this weekend or anything, Greg?
No, I have nothing left. Just to wish everybody out there a happy Thanksgiving. Good luck with your games and in the final stretch as you head into the playoffs.
All right. Same here, guys. I hope you all have a happy Thanksgiving. I know a lot of you guys will be listening to some of you guys will be listening to this show Thursday morning before the Thursday slate games. Some of you get a chance to hear this Friday and Saturday before the Sunday games. Again, we want to thank you for listening to us in terms of Thanksgiving Day. Thank you for being willing to listen to us and for us to giving us the chance to give you a little bit of advice on your fantasy teams. Again, we are the Skull King Fantasy Football Podcast. My name is Ryan Scullard. I'm the founder. Greg was here with me tonight. Again, we hope you all have a good week, and we look forward to talking to you again next week. All right, see you guys.